What I'm going to talk to you guys about today is quite literally just how to have a happy soul. I know kind of that says what the title's going to be, but I'm just going to wing it somewhere completely different. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Happy Soul Project. And it's funny because everyone thinks Happy Soul Project, it's associated with our Different is Beautiful campaign and Down syndrome and PIP and all those things you saw in the video. And while it is, when you really look at it, it quite literally is just one person's journey, one person's path on having a happy soul. What it really is kind of my pledge to myself, my pledge to my children, that no matter what life throws my way, I'm going to have a happy soul. And Happy Soul Project started in a really, really dark and vulnerable place. It started a few weeks after my little girl was born, and we took her home from the hospital, and we weren't sure about her Down syndrome diagnosis. And we were told that it was positive, and I kind of put myself in this fog, and I kind of put myself in this bubble, and a couple weeks after she was born, I remember putting her down in her crib after rocking her to sleep, and I kind of looked up, and right above was this sign that I had made. And the sign said, "Life is more beautiful because you are here." And I remember placing her in the crib and just falling to my knees in such sadness. I mean, it was the first time I actually realized what it was to weep. My entire body, my entire being was just so sad and so shattered. And with Pip's diagnosis, there were so many levels of dealing with that grief. I mean, there was the sadness, there was the anger, there was the why me's, and there was this whole area of guilt, if you will. I replayed the pregnancy. With my first son, I did everything totally by the book. I didn't eat salami, and I didn't take out the dryer lint and all that kind of stuff. But with my second child, I was a bit more lenient. So as soon as they told me that diagnosis, I immediately thought back to all the things I did when I was pregnant. And I ignorantly thought that I somehow caused Down syndrome. And the other part of this guilt that I am going to walk, okay? If my skirt goes up, it's going to go up. But it just feels more comfortable. Hello, follow me. But yeah, there's this other part of the guilt with my little girl. And, she was a couple days old, and she was in my arms, and she was so beautiful and looking at me, and she just so needed to be loved. And I was so sad and so scared that she could sense all these feelings of anger and guilt and sadness that I was feeling. So it was this weird time and this weird fog of emotion for me. But I remember putting her in that crib, putting her in that crib and kind of placing her down and then just falling to my knees and just being so sad. But as I got up, I walked to the computer. And, in today's day and age with social media, everyone knew I was pregnant. Everyone knew I was having a baby. Everyone knew I was going into labor. I'm the mom who posted the picture. I was, about to have her. And before we even knew she was diagnosed with Down syndrome, I was posting pictures of her. So everyone knew we had a baby. And then all of a sudden, I kind of just went dark. And I didn't answer messages. I didn't answer emails. My husband had to call family and had to call our friends and tell them that our little girl not only had Down syndrome, but that she had major eye and heart issues and needed surgery immediately. But in that moment, after I placed her in the crib, I went to the computer, and instead of answering all the messages and answering all the emails, I just decided that I was going to create a blog. And I had already had a little mummy blog, and my friends and my girlfriends and my aunt read this blog, so I thought I would just write it there and everyone could then find out about everything. And it's the only time in my life that I actually sat down, and I don't remember one moment of it. I remember crying. I don't know if I was there for 4 minutes or if I was there for 4 hours, but I left everything I was thinking, and I just let the words flow. And this really vulnerable and honest point of view from a mom kind of flew through it. And it's not the first time that words kind of have helped healed me. It's not the first time that words have kind of been my safety. My parents tell me that my entire life, no matter what, even as a little girl, I always, always, always would tell people that I wanted to be a writer or a ballerina. I mean, and even to this day, if you told me, what do you want to do with your life? I would tell you that to see my name on a book in a bookstore would just fulfill everything in me possible. And it's funny because our Different is Beautiful calendars that you saw in the video and our apparel line, all of that is sold in bookstores and shops. And, you know, I walk into Chapters and I see our calendar there and I couldn't be prouder. But the thought of having my book there with my name as the author, I mean, it just does it for me. But that all being said, my parents say I took my writing quite serious. And from an early age, I don't know if you can see that, but this is from grade 6, I believe. And I'm literally grading the boys in my class based on personality, appearance, everything. So I took my writing quite serious, as you can see. And thankfully, it moved on to journals and academically. I excelled at that kind of thing. In high school, I decided that another piece of me was kind of being pulled in a different directions. Like I said, words in a way have always been my thing where I kind of feel the most myself when I'm in tuned with writing. But in high school, I kind of got pulled in this other direction. I got pulled in this direction of wanting to help people and really wanted to explore that side of things as far as knowing where to go career-wise. So when I was in high school, I volunteered at a community center and I worked with kids that were just kind of from the rougher part of town, and we gave out breakfast every Sunday. And it was the first time in my life that I actually got to realize, you know, how much of an impact one person could have on another person. In high school, I also got this wild idea that when I was 16, I wanted to move to Toronto and work in a homeless shelter. And I'm originally from Windsor, and that's about 4 hours away from Toronto. And I approached my parents and told them that this is what I wanted to do. And obviously, they were like, But thankfully, my parents knew that I was the type of person that needed to do something like that. I needed to follow the path and the voice that I had inside of me. So they set up safeties and they set up boundaries and they let me do it. And it led to me deciding that I wanted to take social work. So I knew I was going to take social work. I applied and I got a scholarship and I got into social work. And the summer before I went to do that, we had to do a co-op in high school, the very last year of school. And it didn't matter to me because I was already got accepted, already was going to a program. And the only thing I wanted to do was be with my best friend. So my best friend wanted to work in an office and I just said, I'll go wherever. And they put us in a place in Windsor, and it was called the Children's Rehabilitation Center. My best friend worked in the library, and I worked in the classroom. And it was the very first time that I got to see just how magical kids with extraordinary needs could be. It was the very first time I got to see the relationship between parents and children. And it was the very first time I kind of, now looking back, got to see that fate or the universe was kind of setting the foundation of what my heart needed to be. I went on to do other things, and I started doing social work, and maybe in about year 1 or 2, I remember the exact class, and it was about policy and legislation, and I remember sitting there thinking, can you swear? Holy shit. You can? Okay, holy shit. Holy shit, this is not for me. Literally being in the class and knowing fully that social work just wasn't the path for me. And I could have easily finished the course. I could have easily graduated. I could have easily gotten a job and continued on that path. But I just knew something in me knew that that wasn't what I was supposed to do. So to my parents' dismay, I dropped out of university and I decided to travel. And I traveled for a few years, back in scrapbooking years. I traveled for a few years all around and I lived in a few countries and I worked abroad. And those years of my life, and that's what I would encourage youth the most to do. Those years of my life, I think, really made me who I am. They made me fearless, and they made me independent, and they made me confident. They made me the type of person who kind of can think outside the box. And I'll give you one example of that, as my hair is like whipping me in the face. So I got off the plane, I was 20. I got off the plane and I only had enough money to get from the airport to a hostel. And the cab driver dropped me off and I had, a big backpack and all my bags to carry for a few months. And he dropped me off at the hostel, I paid, and I got up to the front, and they said, "I'm sorry, you're at our sister hostel across town." So with all of that on my back, I had to meet the Australian sun and walk about 45 minutes. When I got there, it was in the roughest part of Sydney. It was an area called King's Cross, and for the most part, it was surrounded by strip clubs and bars, and everyone in the hostel either worked at a strip club or in a bar. My roommate actually was a stripper. And what I discovered was there was a bunch of girls there who needed their hair done. So thinking outside of the box, all of a sudden I became Tara, the hairdresser from Canada. And I literally bought scissors from a drugstore and then traveled the entire east coast of Australia, jumping hostel to hostel to hostel, cutting people's hair like Rachel. Just did that the entire time. So whether you had long or short hair, you had Rachel from Friends. That's all you got. But it taught me to just kind of think outside the box and be fearless. And it's pieces of that make me who I am today. And I couldn't encourage youth more to do that kind of thing. While I was traveling, I really was writing the most that I had ever written. And I was really leaning more into that direction of life. So I decided to move back to Canada, and I went to school for journalism. And graduated from journalism and worked for numerous newspapers and discovered that I'm an absolutely horrible, horrible writer. To the point where I'm like actually a disgrace to the profession. I would make up names, I would put boyfriends' names in as quoting things, just not good. The other piece of what I really wanted to do was I really just wanted to Barbara Walters people. So I had an interview with a nun. I worked in Ireland for a national Catholic newspaper. And there was this really important interview with a nun, and I wanted to do it. And I got there and really took this poor lady to town. I mean, I had her crying. I had her questioning her faith, talking about past boyfriends, nothing I could put in the article. But I felt really good. I felt I had gotten there and really Walters the crap out of her. It's to the point, actually, where my husband and I will be at a party or a dinner party, and he'll see that I'm like really engaged with someone, and he'll either yell across the room or come and whisper in my ear, like, "Enough, Walters, enough." But yeah, I took the time and really tried to figure out what path I wanted to go on. From journalism and discovering that I was a horrible writer, I decided that human resources was more my style. And I got into that, and I went back to school. I worked for public health, and I became a manager of human resources. And I think that was the time in my life where I really got to realize and figure out and pinpoint how to be somebody else's voice, how to kind of mediate between two sides. And I don't know, I'm in this really strange and cool place right now where I'm standing, where I'm the founder of Happy Soul Project, where all these elements and all these pieces of my life, for some strange reason, seem to align. And I think, back to the panel talk where I didn't want to say anything, what I want people to know and what I want young people to know is to give yourself grace to explore. Give yourself time to figure out who you are. Give yourself grace to go down one path, and if that doesn't work, go down another. And I think, so much in life, people pigeonhole you or put you in this box. And if people just start giving themselves grace to figure out who they are, you'll get to that path much sooner. And the other piece of that for me, in discovering who I am and where I'm meant to be right now, is these really big full circle moments that I've been having. I talked about it briefly, just about, sometimes in life when you get down or when you're not realizing what you're supposed to be doing or getting discouraged, and how the universe kind of plays its part in letting you know you're in the right direction. And for me, I've been having these really, really, really big full circle moments where all of a sudden I feel like I'm in this really sweet spot of purpose. My little boy the other day, he kept calling my name, and I was making breakfast and I was kind of ignoring him, and finally I looked over and he was carrying my little girl like this. And I looked over and it was like lightning struck me and I could barely breathe, because it so deja vu'd me into this moment, and it so flashed forward this full circle purpose in my life. That co-op I told you about, where I worked at the Children's Rehabilitation Center. After I was done, I met a family there, and they asked if I'd work with their little girl. She was a teenager. Her name was Emily. And I worked with her for a whole summer, and she just happened to have Down syndrome. And I used to take her for dinner or to the movies, and I'd constantly take her to my family's house, to play board games or do something. And she had the hugest crush on my little brother. And he was maybe 14 at the time, and every time she came running into the door, she'd run over to him and jump in his arms like that. And I just flashed forward to my brother kind of carrying Emily in that position, and I don't know, all of a sudden it all kind of made sense for me. And my mom tells me, if I had chosen the ballerina route instead of the writer route, I kind of maybe might still be standing here, because the ballerina route, I guess I took just as seriously. I apparently learned to walk on the tips of my toes, and to the point where doctors had to send me to that exact same children's rehabilitation center where I had to learn to walk flat-footed. In 2 weeks, I'll be going back to that exact same children's rehabilitation center, and I'll be opening a wing, a whole entrance, that'll be a Happy Soul Project, Happy Soul Project entrance. And this mural that my dad and I made will be hanging on the walls. And I can't tell you how fulfilling that is, how monumental it is to push me forward and to know that what I'm doing right now in life is meant to be. So I guess, I just would encourage you, they might not be as outrageously full circle as this, but just to kind of find your full circle moments, whatever they may be. The other one that really, really kind of changed my life is when you first are given the diagnosis that your child has Down syndrome, you're given either this brochure or this new parent package, and it could be, before the diagnosis or right as soon as you receive it. And we received this package, and my husband, he really loved that kind of thing. It provided medical information and factual stuff and maybe community stuff about who you could contact for local support. But for me, it was missing kind of a real and raw look from another parent. And fast forward maybe 2 years, I was approached by the Canadian Down Syndrome Society to see if I would like to write a letter to these parents. So now every single package that a new parent receives who has a baby with Down syndrome receives this letter from a mom, a letter from me, just kind of telling them that the feelings they're having, the emotions they're having, the circle of grief that they're going through is all okay. And I don't know, for me, this moment in my life, I think will go down as the most powerful. I think will go down as the most humbling. And for me, this moment brought redemption. Those first few weeks when I was so sad, those first few weeks when I was doubting the purpose my daughter was going to have in my life, this moment brings redemption for that. So I just really want to leave you with that, with finding, and tears and win, really great combo I got going up here. I just really want to leave you with those 2 points to start, is just give yourself grace to explore who you are and find your full circle moments. The third thing I want to talk about, and we kind of talked about on the panel, is just turn and tune. And what that means is just kind of turn off the noise and tune into your voice. I think in today's society, you know, there's so much noise out there. There's so much stimulation, whether that's Netflix or social media or, I mean, I'm clicking things like watching a man create a mini Ukrainian Easter egg. Like, there's so much stuff out there that, you know, you're watching or you're seeing, and you know, every night I feel like I just am filling my mind with all these things. You could ask me 7 minutes later what I just watched or what I just read, and I probably couldn't even tell you. I'm interested at the time, but you know, I just feel like we're putting so much noise into each other that we don't really get a clear path on what the voice is. And I'll give you an example. The Down syndrome community, it's super big and it's super vibrant and it's very celebratory, and there's so many elements to it. In 1 year's time, the Down syndrome community does so many events. I mean, there's World Down Syndrome Day, there's World Down Syndrome Awareness Month, there's paint your nails, there's wear crazy socks. There's so much that they do within the community. And the first few years of my little girl's life, I did everything. I killed myself trying to write a blog every single day when it was Down Syndrome Awareness Month. I tried to do everything that you possibly could. And at one point, a local radio station here in Kingston used the word retarded to describe the weather. And you know, our local Down syndrome community was up in arms, and numerous people contacted me, and it was a big fight that needed to be had. And one family in particular, they were driving and they had their son who had Down syndrome in the car and a few other siblings, and the other siblings had never heard that word before, and they kept asking the parents what it meant. So there was a lot of outrage about it, and numerous people asked if I'd use my platform as Happy Soul Project to approach the radio station. So I did, and it went viral. The article went on to Huffington Post, and everything became a really big deal. And while I think that's important, and while I think, you know, the conversation needed to be said, and while I'm glad the radio station apologized, it wasn't necessarily my fight to fight. It wasn't Happy Soul Project's message, and I think I've learned that along the way. I've learned to tune in and be true to what I want my message to be, and not necessarily pick up everyone's sword just because it needs to be fought. So I think that's a huge part in kind of just turning off the noise and tuning into yourself. And then the main thing that I think my little girl, Pip, has taught me in life is just refusing to sink. You know, all of us go through a lot in life, and all of us have stages where we feel in ruts, and we have burnouts, and our careers don't feel fulfilling or whatnot. And I think for myself, I said it in the panel, but running a nonprofit, it can be really tiring, and it can be really thankless. We run something called Kick It Capes, and this project started because my best friend had a little boy, Mason, and she called me, and she lives maybe 8 hours away, and called me and told me that her little boy has cancer. And I put a message out on Happy Soul Project, just one little message, and I just asked someone if they could make one cape. And right away, numerous people were, you know, sending me messages and dropping off capes and doing all these sorts of things. And from one little cape and one little boy, we all of a sudden have this really important nonprofit project where we send these personalized superhero capes all around the world, and we encourage kids to fight whatever they're fighting. But at the same breath, my best friend lost her little boy, and working on this project is really heartbreaking. You know, we do it, and it's powerful, and it's something so beautiful that I'm so honored to get to do with her. But in the same breath, when you get message after message that kids need these capes, or you get message after message of pictures of the capes on coffins, it does you in. And there's this whole component of running a nonprofit that really drains you. There's also this whole piece of being a blogger and putting your life out there and sharing your life. The ignorant comments you get, the judging you get from other moms. There's this whole cycle of what it is to be a blogger in life. And then there's the whole side of being a mom. And, you saw a little bit, but my little girl has not had the easiest path in life. And being a mom to anyone, but being a mom to a kid with extraordinary needs is really heartbreaking. My little girl, in 2 weeks' time, we're bringing her for her 11th surgery. And she's 4 years old, and she's going for her 11th surgery. And it's to the point now where she knows what's happening. She knows a couple weeks beforehand that I'm rocking her extra long. She knows, a couple days ahead of time when I'm rocking her so long that I think she's sleeping, and she just kind of reaches up and she wipes my tears away. She doesn't say anything. She just kind of wipes them away, and we just stay like that for hours sometimes. She knows when, it's the day of the surgery and I'm picking her up and it's still dark outside and she's in her PJs and I'm not giving her breakfast. She knows when we go to that same receptionist and she has Snicker bars for me and a teddy bear for Pip. She knows when, I'm taking her little contact out and I'm putting her in a hospital gown. And she knows when we go into the operating room that I'm getting ready to pretty much put on a concert. My little girl loves music more than anyone I've ever met in my life. And, as a parent, you're allowed to go into the operating room and sing your child to sleep. And when she was little, I just could softly sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star or Row, Row Your Boat. But as she gets older, she's wanting a full-on, I had to go in the fall and mean Adele, full-on sang out hello, and I looked up and nurses are crying and doctors are giving it with me, and in 2 weeks, I don't know what that song's gonna be. But regardless of all that, regardless of the surgeries, regardless of every single diagnosis my little girl gets, she refuses to sink. And, if I can leave you with anything, it would be that. It would be take each day as it is, refuse to sink whatever the situation is. And the last thing I kind of just want to leave with you is to know I'm way behind here, whoopsie, is to know your dent on the universe. And what I mean by that is each of us is here for just such a short time. Each of us is here for this tiny little moment in history. And I think a lot of us don't realize the impact that we have. And you saw in the video a story about two strangers, and I just want to leave you with that. The first stranger was a doctor, and my little girl was 3 days old, and Pip was in my arms, and the doctor had the audacity to say to me that if I chose to have another baby, he could prevent this from happening. And that doctor has no idea what seed he planted in me. He has no idea the fight that he created. I wouldn't be able to pick out that doctor, just like I wouldn't be able to pick out the little lady who really changed the course of my life. My little girl, when she was 5 weeks old, she had her first surgery. And we were at the Kingston General Hospital. And I left, she was in recovery. A few days later, I left and I went down to the little kind of, hospital gift shop. And it was the first time I actually said the words out loud to a stranger that my little girl had Down syndrome. I had written it on the blog and I had said it to friends, but I had never actually said it to a stranger. And I remember saying it to her, and she kind of put down what I was buying, and she came around the counter. She grabbed my shoulder so tightly, and she told me that I was so lucky. And she later went on to explain that her brother had Down syndrome, and he was absolutely the best thing that's ever happened in her entire life. And that little old lady, I don't know who she is. I go to that hospital all the time, and I always peek my head in, and I wouldn't be able to even pick out who she was. But she changed my life. And I now feel like I'm her, and I'm kind of shaking the world's shoulders. And my hope is that I'm shaking enough to dent the universe. Thanks.